Hello everybody, welcome to the second video of the series in which we are revising the full UPSC syllabus. In this second video, we will be studying about the sources which are needed to construct the history. As we all know that there are various sources that are needed to write the history correctly, and these sources are divided into two types. One is literary sources and the other is archaeological sources. The components of literary sources are those sources which are in written form. And the example of these sources are the books, the manuscripts, the writings, travel accounts, biographies, and administrative accounts, etc. Under the archaeological sources, we see that these sources such as beads, pillars, caves, temples, and some other sources like stupas, palaces, ponds, etc. that those were constructed in the respective kingdoms or respective time periods are included. Now let us understand the two sources separately, and the first one is the literary sources. These literary sources are further classified into domestic, secular, foreign, and religious sources. An example of these sources are that domestic sources are those sources those were written in India, such as Kautilya's Arthashastra. Secular sources are those sources which do not include in them the religious aspect, and these are like travel accounts, biographies, etc. Under the foreign sources, the sources those were written by the foreigners are included, such as Megasthenes. I can comment that what did Megasthenes wrote. Now the other sources are religious sources, and these include Vedic sources, Buddhist sources, Jainist sources, and other sects books. Now let us first understand about the religious sources. So the religious sources, when we further classified them in the Indian context, we see that the two religious sources are very prominent. Those are Vedic and the other is Buddhist and Jainism sources. These three sources are very prominent to construct the history of the India. Now under the Vedic, we see that there are two types of text are composed. The one was Shruti text and the other was Smriti text. Under the Shruti text, we see that four Vedas were written, and under each Vedas we see one and this Karm Kand and the Gyan Kand. Under the Karm Kand, we see that Samhitas and Brahmans were composed, and under the Gyan Kand, we see that Aranyakas and Upanishad were constructed. If we see at these Smritis, we see that the Upveds, Vedangas, Vedopangas, Dhamshastra, Puranas, and Itihasas are the components of this Smriti. Now let's move to the next heading, that is secular literature. Under the secular literature, we see that there are two types of literature, and the one is local or domestic, and the other is foreign literature. As we know that the local and domestic literature will include those writings which were written in India, and this include Arthashastra by Kautilya and the various poems such as by Banu Kalidasa and Bhairava, etc. Some prose writing that Visakh who wrote Mudrakshas, and Banavat, who wrote Arashcharita. Under the foreign writers, we see that Greeks, Latin, Chinese, etc. they came to visit the country in their respective time period and wrote about India, such as like under Greek we see that Megasthenes, Strabo, Diodorus, Justin, Diomachus, and Ptolemy. These were the prominent writers. Diomachus was a Greek ambassador to Bindusar courts. Under the Latin, we see that Pliny was the prominent writer. And under the Chinese heading, we see that Paiyan, Winsang, and Ising were the prominent ones. Titan comments the writings of these three. Let us now separately look at the significance of these writings. The significance of the literary sources can be classified into these headings, and these are political significance, societal significance, economical significance, religious significance, and scientific significance. Under the political significance, we see that war and administration was understood and constructed through these writings. The society, the condition of women, rituals, and other practice were came to knowledge of the writers. And the economy, under the economy, we see the trades and commerce of the periods. The various guilds were in prominence, and the coinage system of that time. Also, under the religion, we see that what was the nature of the religion, how and how and what, how many and in what ways the gods were worshipped, and what were the rituals and culture of that time. Also, under the scientific significance, we see and measure the progress and what were the process used in the scientific development. Now, for example, under the Vedic age, we see the study of Aryans. Under Mahajanpadas, we look into the Buddhist sources and focus on politics and Jain. Under the we understood about the Mauryans from Sangam literature, Jain literature, Charak Samhita, and Shad Darshan. So we clearly see that there was a proper significance of these sources in construction of history. Now, as we see that Gupta period was mainly constructed from science and poetry books of that time and the foreign accounts. The post-Gupta period, the kings' biographies and copper plate inscriptions played a very important role. Now let us look into the various archaeological sources at various archaeological sources. These archaeological sources can be classified into various types, and these are that stone stone tools and various artifacts, and the other we can say the inscriptions, which included the prashastis, and they were like religious prashastis, pedantic, administrative. There were various type of prashastis, etc. And the other is the coins. We get many we get to see many coins from various kingdoms, and we can infer very good information from these coins. And these coins were of many types. Some types are like they were metal types, metal coins, punch mark coins, and figure impressed coins, on which figure was impressed or carved. Figure was carved, we can say. The others are monuments. Under the monuments, we can cover stupas, pillars, caves, temples, sculpture, seals, amulets, etc. Under the pottery, we also see that pottery also played an important role and gave important information about the time period of, and this pottery has understood the material. When we read about the pottery, we read about what the material was used and color was used and how these materials, this pottery was painted. Now let us now try to understand about the significance of the archaeological sources. Under the significance of the archaeological sources, we see that The first point we see that it gives the study of past through material remains. Study of past through material remains. Second point we see that artifacts define the culture and way of living. The artifacts which are included into the archaeological sources, they define the culture, culture and way of living. This shows historical process and progress. This shows historical process and progress with time. How the with time the civilization or the history progressed. They also correlate data with literary sources. The literary sources which we use to establish the history are correlated with archaeological sources and are authenticated. Also, they give us detail about technology, trade, burial, or cultural practices, food habits, and agriculture. Yeah. They also fulfill historical understanding where literary sources are not available. Where literary sources are not available, the, they fulfill the understanding of history of that place or time period. Now let us understand that how are coins proved to be important source of history. Now let us understand about this question. First of all, the study of coins is known as numismatics. Before that, let us understand that how it evolved as currency. How the coin got evolved as currency. Because earlier, before coins, we see that there was barter system which was prevalent. But due to complexity in trade, when there was a complexity in trade, for example, in barter system, it was like there are two persons A and B. If one needed was in need of wheat and other was in need of milk. But what if and if both needed, then they would have exchanged among themselves. But what if A needed milk? What if A did not need the milk, but he needed something else, for example, rice, and B needed something else like pulses? And to cope up with this complexity, the coinage system was developed. Now let us come to our other point that what does numismatics includes? So the numismatics include the material study of coins, the sources of the material or alloy, sources of alloys, and weight. How much these coins different coins weight, the wear and tear of the coins with time, wear and tear of coins with weight. We see that there were many coins who had messages upon them, pictures engraved on them. So these messages and pictures, what message they conveyed, then this was inferred, and we see that they gave a details of kings and titles. If we look to the question that where they were found, then we see in history that they found in forts. Forts means that at the time of the kingdom, someone has stored the coins and put somewhere in the field, in the field or anywhere, and the archaeologists found now. So we found in this way we find many coins at one place. We also see that some coins have dates mentioned on them, and the coins also show that the monetary progress or the economical progress. Also, the technique of making coins shows the scientific development. Now, let us understand the other topic, that is, what is the significance of inscriptions. So, the significance of inscriptions can be understood in the following points. The first point is the study of inscriptions. What is the study of inscriptions called? Study of inscriptions called epigraphy. The study of inscriptions is called epigraphy. And what are inscriptions? The inscriptions are the writings on stone, wood, plates of metal, bricks, shells, pottery, etc. So, as you can see, there is a pattern in the examples of this. And the pattern is that these all are the solid surfaces. So, whatever written on a solid surface is considered to be the inscription. So, how are inscriptions significant to the construction of history? The significance of the inscription can be understood in this way that these are the durable sources and contemporary to time and writing of the place. These are durable sources that you can rely on and they last longer, and they were contemporary to the time. Contemporary to the time. We can also identify the addition and changes, and the inscription gives large info in small writings. In small writings, suppose for example, this is a stone. So in the small writings, they give us the large details. They also gives us they also gives us the they also give us the political and geographical knowledge, like where wherever our inscription is found, it tells us the geographical knowledge, gives us the geographical knowledge of that place. It gives us political and geographical knowledge. How does it give geographical knowledge? For example, the various types of stones are found on the basis of the geography of the place. Geography of the place. So the inscriptions also tells us the geography of the place and the political structure of that time. But it also creates confusion and counter argument. Also create confusion because we have to look into the dates. It creates confusion among the time, mainly of what time period these encryptions are. The confusion is much more on this, but they gives the detail of revenue and administrative work, script and language used, this designation of official and land grants. So the inscriptions clearly tells us the revenue and administrative work, revenue and administrative work. It clearly tells us about script of that time, which script the inscription is written, and what was the language used, how officials were designated, the various designations of officials, and land grants. These were the important information we received from the inscriptions. If we look into the example of inscription, we see many examples and particularly from the Ashokan period. So the few examples of the inscriptions are Shohabura inscription. Shohabura inscription. Second example is Utair Merur. Utair Merur inscription. Third is Aihole inscription. Aihole is very famous inscription. Another is Prayag inscription. Next is Iran Lumbini. Barabar is inscriptions. Barabar. Hathgumfa. Mandsaur. Nasik. And Junagadh. There are many other examples, but these are the prominent examples of the inscriptions. One should also know the location of these inscriptions. Now, let us look into the question that how to study archaeological evidences. How should one study the archaeological sources? So there are many methods prevalent to know to study about the archaeological sources. The few methods are like the first method is carbon dating method. Carbon dating method in which carbon isotope is used. The isotope name is C40. Other is chemical analysis of soil. Chemical analysis of soil is done to study the evidence in which, for example, nitrogen content was checked at Inam from. And the third point is that we use paleontology and study the remains of dead organism. Paleontology, and we study the remains of dead organisms, and we study particularly DNA. The fourth point is faunal analysis. Faunal analysis means the study of bones, in which, for example, hunting and domestication. Hunting and domestication are easily understood through faunal analysis. Suppose suppose an animal was hunted, then we can easily see that there will be some cut on bones, and those cut will not be like specific, but they can be anywhere in the body. Cut on bone. Also faunal analysis is used to understand the location of person from host. समुद्र तल से वो कितनी दूर रहता है, faunal analysis can tell us. The other is paleopathology. Paleopathology. It means study of diseases from bones. By studying the bones, we can infer the various diseases prevalent at that time. Other is paleobotanical. In this, we see that paleobotanical, we study plants, grains, etc. Study of plants, grains, etc. And other is seventh is ethnoarchaeology. Ethnoarchaeology, in which we study living creatures and communities, their behavior, practice of living or communities in order to interrupt archaeological evidence. We study living creatures and communities. Study living creature and communities. Now, why do we do this? In order to interpret archaeological interpret archaeological evidences. Now, there is a next question which we can address, and the question is that, does geography impact history? Does geography impact history? To answer this question, let us understand few points, and these points are that mountains, valleys, and passes, they are the barriers. Mountains, valleys, and passes, they act as barrier and entry points. They act as barrier and entry points. So they play important role in the construction of history or in the formation of history. How do they do that? For example, the mountain, they act as barrier and they cannot connect two civilization living apart. But passes, they prove an entry point. So the two civilizations can meet and form a different culture and shape the history. Also, plains. Plains have fertility, which provide ample place for agriculture, and this agriculture lead to settled population, and this settled population form various culture, religion, political structure, administrative structure. So we can say that this also an important factor to shape the history. Now, the other point is rainfall and climate. Rainfall and climate also rainfall and climate. It also affect the living conditions and other factors which affect humans, which in turn impact the history. Also, we see that role of natural resources. The natural resources found in the geography plays a very prominent role and in impacting the history. For example, Magad became so powerful because it had abundance of natural resources like iron and elephants, which helped in war and establishment of such a big empire. So friends, in the next video, we will be covering the prehistoric India and various ages like Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, Chalcolithic, etc. And also we will be covering the various cultures. After this, we will move to the Indus Valley civilization. So bye bye for this video. Let's meet in the other video. Thank you.